Hello everyone, I hope you're all well and I hope you can hear me. Thanks for the introduction, Sue. I'm the communications manager here at Keener's Mustard, and I've been working in the editorial and marketing kind of PR fields for market research now for around 8 years, both here at Mustard and before that at SMR, as I'm sure you're all aware of that. Currently I'm working on media and communications across a wide range of kind of elements, but today specifically we're going to talk about media relations for MR agencies and how to get coverage for your agency or your supplier agency in the press, in the media, but really looking at the problems with DIYing it. So hopefully, yeah, slides are working. Right, so let's briefly define what I mean by PR. PR has traditionally meant press relations and was the practice of managing the distribution of information between individuals or organizations to gain exposure and raise profiles through publication of content in newspapers and magazines. That's a very dictionary definition of it there. But these days, we still call it PR, but in our increasingly online world, the PR remit has expanded beyond print and now encompasses traditional press titles as well as a whole host of associated online platforms and blogs. In fact, for most MR agencies and suppliers, the output of your PR activities will more often than not end up online rather than print. So today we're going to talk about the distribution of content to relevant media and press outlets for the MR industry. This could be trade press such as Research World, Research Live, Quirks, even NewMR, or broader marketing titles such as Marketing Week, and then you can move on into kind of verticals and category press. These are titles that relate to a specific external sector. As an example, if you do a lot of work for retail and FMCG companies, your verticals will be titles such as Retail Week or The Grocer. And then you can even talk after that about the Guardians and the BBCs, the Nationals, or the Dailies as they're called. So, what's the problem with DIY? Well, many agencies think that by doing some research and getting some data, all you need to do is give it to a journalist and the coverage is just going to flow in. Needless to say, it's a lot more complicated than that. First off, there's no such thing as just placing an article. Every single piece of coverage you get is fought for. So doing PR is a specialist and expert process and one that is very hard to do without any experience. Of course, there are many ways to get coverage in the media, but as we've only got 10 minutes here, and we're going to focus kind of on one of the primary ways MR people think they can get press coverage, which is through a big self-funded research study. So let's begin with something we see quite often. You've just invested a ton of money in a great piece of self-funded research. Your sales team love it, and to get sign-off for the investment and provide a better return, you've promised the directors at your company you'll be able to get some press coverage off the back of the study. Surely it can't be that hard. Well, unfortunately, one of the biggest challenges we have at Mustard is trying to retrofit self-funded research that was conducted prior to us coming on board. More often than not, most of the content is entirely unsuitable for trade media, particularly we find for marketing media. But why is that? What elements are you missing? Well, first off, PR is a very specialist undertaking. In our experience, most small to medium-sized agencies or supplier companies are working with a very, very limited marketing team, if any marketing team at all. The majority of the resource is usually focused on kind of email marketing, website update, a bit of copywriting, printing collateral, designing brochures, things like that. So I'm going to go through some of the common issues agencies and supplier agency marketing people have in securing press coverage, and some of the questions you need to ask yourself before you embark. First off, you need to ask yourself, do you have a strategy? I could fill an entire presentation with strategy alone. Your PR activities need to be linked to a company-wide marketing strategy. We often see businesses put all their resources into a single piece of content that is not linked in any way to an overarching strategy. Unfortunately, we find that the company has no marketing strategy, so if you don't know what your overall strategic aims are, then you don't know what your message should be. This means that your PR activities are just shooting in the dark, trying to raise a profile without a message that is relevant to your company, and connecting with decision makers in a very loose and inconsistent fashion. It's actually funny that this is such a commonplace problem. Within the marketing research and insights community, we advise our clients on strategy constantly, but so often we fail to turn the spotlight on ourselves. The next thing you need to ask is, do you understand your target? A good PR professional knows where the decision makers are and where they can be reached. Often we find coverage in the national media or the dailies is the holy grail for a lot of agencies. But really that can be a waste of resource and marketing budget for all but the biggest agencies and companies that are directly involved in polling. In general, it will serve only as a scattergun approach. It will not keep your company top of mind without repeated and regular exposure. As such, many research agencies see coverage in marketing media as vital, the perceived media of choice for their client decision makers. However, they often forget that commissioners of research are more likely to also be engaged within the market research trade media. It's also very important to consider the sector media. If your agency works in a particular sector, such as retail, there'll be a raft of trade media targets you can use to put your agency in front of decision makers. Sure, titles like Floor Covering Weekly may not be the most glamorous magazine around, but if that's the industry you're conducting research in, you're far more likely to reach your target audience than by publishing a piece in Marketing Week. A good PR professional also needs to understand what those target titles require. As an example, in terms of a self-funded research consumer project, no journalist is going to touch it without it being conducted with at least a 1,000 nationally representative sample, and preferably more than that. You won't get anywhere without that sample, regardless of whether it would be considered perfectly good research within the industry. In particular, outside the research industry, journalists will not even look at a qualitative study without any quantitative numbers backed up. Time is also a major issue for you on a number of levels, mainly because PR projects is a long-term project. As Tom was saying earlier, attention and intensity is really important in terms of kind of a campaign. So like advertising, a single piece of content appearing in a media outlet is going to have a limited effect on raising your profile. Once you have your content ideas built from your strategy, you need to push that content to multiple titles and through multiple channels. This is why at Keen as Mustard we will only ever take a PR project on for a minimum of 6 months. It also takes time to nurture the relationships with journalists. You need to be taking note of your media targets over a course of time, what they are publishing and who by. There's nothing worse than investing in a huge self-funded research study only to find that a competitor did it 3 months beforehand. You also need to do your research on competitors. What are they pushing out in terms of content? Once you've had your article accepted, you've got to be ready for a very quick turnaround. This could be within 24 hours in some cases. You need a resource on hand to cover that, otherwise you'll be at risk of damaging those relationships, of which I'll speak of next. Time also becomes a factor in other key elements of media relationships. At the minimum, to make a good impact in these titles, it's a full-time job for a specialist. So, next up. Now you need to think about relationships. Being a PR specialist in some ways is very similar to being a key account manager. You need to build relationships with editors in your target publications. You can't just bung them an email and expect to be published. We're constantly taking time to meet with, and of course wine and dine, editors of trade and industry titles. We build long-term relationships with these people to better understand their needs, as well as providing opportunities for our clients. These relationships also hinge on your ability to hit deadlines. If you promise an article for publication, particularly if it's a print publication and you don't deliver, you can give yourself a reputation as an unreliable contributor, cutting further opportunities for publication in that particular title. And I believe this was mentioned by someone before as well. It's telling a story. This is really important. Many trade titles will have very small editorial teams. Many have a team of one. an editor whose job it is to collate and curate the content of each publication or blog. They often rely on the PR professional to submit finished articles for publishing. A lot of people out there consider themselves to be excellent writers and feel they'll have no problem knocking up an article for trade media. But writing for press takes experience. No two titles are the same, and each one will require a different angle and a tone of voice, as well as a level of data or detail. You need to be able to build a narrative through your data, find the information that is pertinent to the title, and frame that within the story. Storytelling is a much vaunted quality in MR-like strategy, but it's something that researchers find it easier said than done. But all I've talked about can be tackled with experience, and this is a real paramount element. Like any business discipline, you can't just jump in blind. You will also find that it's something that, well, certainly we find that it's something that can only be taught academically with limitations. For a good PR exec, you need someone that has learned on the job. When we employ for PR roles at Mustard, we will rarely employ those with marketing and PR qualifications that haven't had any experience. For a junior role, we actually find that the critical thinking elements of degrees such as history of art, and English literature are far more useful within the kind of marketing research framework of media relations. When it comes to a more senior role, we do not care what qualifications or degree that they've had, as long as they've had some experience, and that's the only thing that matters for us. So there you go. That was my very short 10 minutes on media relations in PR. I hope it was of some use to you guys, and it's the most important thing to think is that you need a specialist, and it's well worth the investment. And if you can't get the talent in-house, then it's definitely worth going for an agency.